Hello, everyone. Again, I'm Jackie Kelm. I'd like to welcome you to this second session in the Staying Sane series, how to keep it together when the world is falling apart. So today we're going to be talking about, again, how to stay sane when the world just really seems crazy. And last time, I'm going to just really briefly go over what I talked about in the first session, because some of this we're going to build on for this time. So just give me a minute here to go back. And the whole idea is that we have sort of two brains in our head. We have this, I don't know why I like the reptile over here, but we have this reptilian brain, which is our brain that has like cortisol and adrenaline and things and gets us all worked up and nervous. And this is the brain that makes us want to fight and flight, and it tries to protect us from threats. And it also performs a lot of important things like our automatic functions like heart rate and breathing and other things. This is a really important brain. And the thing is, we just need to keep him in check. But this is what gets activated when we do feel afraid or scared and other negative emotions. Oops, I got the wrong puppet. So many puppets, so little time. All right, so this one is the cortex. The cortex is our good feeling brain. This is our thinking brain. This is the one that's really good at analyzing and assessing and making sense of things. This is the brain that also produces the good feeling chemicals, dopamine, oxytocin, etc., that make us feel good. And so this reptilian brain sits at the base of our head and the cortex sits at the top. And so last week I talked about, I'm going to have to bend down, how this is kind of the ideal where you want. So you want your reptile brain, but you want him just kind of hanging out in the background. You need your cortex leading the show to really be effective. Now, you might think, okay, well, that's fine, but what's the problem? Well, here's the problem. We've been wired over many years to have the cortex respond when there's a lot of threats. Well, up until recently, there weren't so many threats. But now, oh my goodness, right? We've got COVID, we've got pandemics, we've got climate issues, we've got political polarization, we have social unrest, we have terrorism, we have so many things. So what's happening, there's threats all around us. So now what's happening is, instead of being like this, we're reversed. We've got the reptile running the show. And what that means is we're in a constant state of fight or flight. And when we are in this place, we don't think nearly as well. The cortex is the one that has the strong thinking capability, not the reptilian brain. So as a result, we end up missing information that's said to us. We end up overreacting, underreacting, not reacting, so forth. So the goal is to survive in today's world, to thrive, to feel really good. We want the cortex on top. The last piece I'll share that we talked about last week was that there are really three parts to thriving or to staying sane. One is our thinking, the second is our actions, and the third is our feelings. All three of these, when done from the cortex, serve us best. But unfortunately, again, we're all operating out of the reptilian brain. So our brain is essentially wired backwards for what we need today. Okay, so let's go on and let's talk about how we begin to rewire the brain to be the way we want. And I, last week, again, identified three core skills we need. The first one is understanding that, first of all, you want this, you don't want this. Okay, so you might think that's obvious, but it's not at all. We really think we're better off when the reptile is running the show. We believe mistakenly that when we're a little anxious or scared or uptight, we think we make better decisions. We don't. Research shows we don't. We think we're focused more and we're hearing the information more clearly. Not true. It's the opposite. We miss information. We misinterpret things. We make worse decisions. Our whole cognitive function is worse. So first, you got to understand that that's not how it works. The second thing, and what I'm going to talk about today, is beginning to actually do exercises that will help rewire and retrain your brain to get your cortex on top. Last week, I gave you the goodness glasses as one. Here we go, prop 3. The goodness glasses, you put these on and you look for good things around you, and that helps to get that cortex back on top. Today, we're going to talk about another way to do this. And specifically, I want to focus it on polarization. I think that's such a big deal right now. And so we're going to talk about that as I go through this. But let me introduce all of you to something called the emotional scale. All right. And this is where I really needed a graphic, and I can't get one, so I'm going to sort of try to make do. If you actually look on the Facebook page, I posted this. I'm going to hold this up for a second. You're not going to be able to see it all. But the idea is that, and I'm going to just kind of talk you through it. The idea is that there's this sort of range of emotions, if you will. If you think of your emotions as like going on a scale from low to high, down at the very bottom, sort of our lowest emotions are numbness, hopelessness, that feeling of actually, if you get to the very base, you actually go unconscious. And some of this comes out of Stephen Porges's work with polyvagal theory. Won't get into that. But at the very base of our negative emotions, if you will, we literally can pass out from fear. Okay. So as you go further up, we go from unconsciousness to numbness to hopeless to hating. Okay. Hating's very low on the scale. Then anger, worry, frustration, neutral. Okay. Then we go up content, curious, hopeful, happy, joyful. So if you think about your range of emotions as sort of this scale, when you think about feeling better and getting into your cortex, it's about moving up the scale. And so what's interesting about this is if you're really hating something or someone or something that's going on in the world, if you move to anger, that's actually progress, that's improvement. So you're not going to go from hating all the way up to joyful. Okay. So as we think about getting that cortex in charge and overcoming our fears and dealing with whatever's going on in our lives, we want to think about moving up the scale in an incremental way. So you can kind of find where you are, and then you can see, well, what's the next one up? Now, the second part I want to talk about with this scale is in the reptilian brain, which is where all the negative emotion is that all of us are experiencing when we are afraid and frustrated or angry about what's going on. There's two different stages there. There's what we call shutdown, which is, I just can't deal anymore. I'm numb, forget it. And you'll hear people talk about this like, I just don't even watch the news anymore. I can't even talk about this. I just need to go in my room and escape. Okay, that's shutdown. That is a nervous system response. It's a physical response when we get too much stress coming at us. All right, and so that's one stage of being in this reptilian brain. The second stage, where a lot of us are more of the time, is this fight or flight stage, and that's kind of moving up the scale. Fight or flight includes things like hating, anger, worried, frustrated. So when you're in this stage, you've got energy to do something. When you're shut down, you don't want to do anything. You're just checked out. Fight or flight, you've got some energy. Okay, so you may get active and you may try to do things. But here's the issue. When you get active, the reptile's in charge, and you end up attacking, defending, running away, and other things that really don't serve you. Okay, so that's the fight or flight stage. We're going to talk about that and how to shift out of that. And then the stage we all want to get to is this cortex stage, which is called the engaged stage. So when you're in the engaged stage, let's see if I can hold this up right. You're connected, you're collaborating, you see others as your friend, as your teacher. Okay, so the cortex is the goal. And let's look at how we get up there. Now, and I just want to so before we even do that, I want to comment for a minute about the stages where we think we are at different places than we are sometimes. And so sometimes you'll look at the news and you'll see somebody does something crazy, right? They drive a car into a bunch of protesters or something, right? And you go, how could somebody do that? Well, they're in hate, all right? So they're in that fight or flight stage. And then think about yourself for a minute, step back and go, whatever your core polarizing issue is that really makes you crazy. I don't know, it's either could be political or climate or social or all of them, right? Think of that opposite side and who or what group makes you the most angry, and say to yourself, have you ever wished that something bad would happen to them, that they might get killed or something like that, right? So no, you aren't driving a car into them, but you're having the thought. That's what hate does. Hate, this is this idea of this is not a good place to be working from, but we do it all the time and we feel it, okay? So, and then anger, oh my goodness, look at the posts you see on Facebook and everywhere. It's horrible sometimes, right? The things people say, and they'll to their friends, you see friends and family breaking up, and it's breaks my heart to see this over this kind of stuff. I'm going to show you how this happens and why and how to deal with it in a second, okay? But I just want to mention this whole idea of how we can find ourselves on this scale, and a lot of times we think we've got it a little more in check than we really do when you get honest and when you understand what's going on with the nervous system. Now, the last thing I want to say about the nervous system is that we know what stage people are in. If someone comes to you, you actually can tell if they're in their reptilian or their cortex without them saying a word. And this is Stephen Porges' work, it's really fascinating. But when we are in the different stages, literally our tone of voice changes, the volume of our voice changes, our expressions, the muscles in our face, other things change that people can perceive. And so a lot of times you can pretend everything's fine, but the other person knows it's not. So that's important for a reason we're going to talk about here next. Okay, I want to drop into polarization for a minute. I have to say, there's all this stuff going on in the world, right? I believe the most dangerous of all of it is polarization. Because if we can't come together and we can't talk and work out these issues, now we got real problems, right? Then we're never going to resolve any of these things. So I personally, this is my mission to really help people understand this whole concept of polarization and to give them tools to deal with it, because I think this is the biggest threat we face. So first of all, how does this even get started? Where does polarization come from? Well, it comes from first of all, it's the reptile, right? And it's because when we are in extreme a threat stage, right? So right now, all these things that are going on, whether it's COVID or terrorism or all these, if it goes wrong, we could die. Like literally, this is a physical thing where we could die. So the consequences are very serious. When the consequences are very serious, the reptilian brain steps in and it takes over and it runs the show. So I want to show you what this looks like. And this is where I need the two other puppets. Okay, so here we go. So this is going to be a little polarization demonstration. So here we've got the cute dog who is, let's say it's you or me, right? We're pretty much know all the right things and everything, and we got our ideas. And then over here is the pig. I couldn't find, poor pigs, like they get a bad rap. I couldn't find a better stuffed animal to represent. But the idea is this is someone who is on the other side of whatever it is you think. So let's say here you go and you meet the pig for lunch, but you don't know that they're on the opposite side. So this is a new friend. You just met this person and you say, hey, George, you know what? I just saw an article in the news that said that there is a pile of plastic the size of Texas floating in the ocean. Can you believe that? Okay, so he makes a statement. And the pig says, oh, I think that whole plastic thing is overrated and out of control. Okay, so what happens? Well, here's what happens. Here you are, and all of a sudden, your reptile takes over because he just said something that threatens your beliefs. Your belief is that, oh my gosh, we got to do something about the plastic. He's saying, no, we don't. You're like, oh my God, we could die. We could die. So what do you want to do in that moment? What do you want to do? You want to whack him in the head, right? But you can't because it's 2020 and you go to jail for that. And we've learned to really calm all those emotions down. When you were a cave person, maybe you would have, but not today. So what's the proverbial whack in the head today? This might surprise you. Well, George, did you read the climate change report? You might be thinking, what? That's not attacking. That's just sharing information. Well, guess what? It could be sharing information if you were sharing it from your cortex, which George can sense, but you're not. You're sharing it from here because what you'd really like to do is whack George in the head. And so George immediately perceives you've got your reptile out. So what does George's brain do? And he can't even control it. It's subconscious. George puts his thing up, right? Well, guess what? Now, so you start saying, did you see the climate change report? Well, what does George say? He's got his reptile out. He says, oh, that's biased. Those people are just looking for attention. Well, now, oh my gosh, now you're highly engaged. You're like, what do you want to do? Blah, blah. You okay? Blah. That's what your brain's wanting to do right now. But again, because you're sophisticated, you're educated, and you've been taught that if I just reply respectfully and I stay centered, it's okay. So I throw some more data at George. Well, guess what? His reptile just keeps refusing, refusing, refusing. Back, next thing you know, guess what? Now the two of us are on complete opposite sides, right? Totally opposite sides. This is how polarization is happening. And the whole idea is that you have to feel good to think good. If you are hating George, if you don't like George, if you're in your reptile brain, you're not going to be effective in that conversation. And of course, the $1,000,000 question is, how do you get out of your reptile brain? Because I'm not saying you have to agree with George or you should agree with George or George is right. My point is, you need to be in your right thinking space when you engage in these conversations. So this whole idea, and let's think about this too. If your goal was really to try to change George's mind about something, you just had the opposite effect. Because what happens when you start sharing data in the spirit of, quote, I'm just sharing data? Well, no, I'm actually trying to push my ideas on George because I think he doesn't know what he's talking about. When I do that and he defends, guess what happens? He reinforces his position. We actually reinforce. George now has to defend himself. So he goes into his mind and starts rationalizing and looking at all the ways he's right, because that's what the brain does. That's what the reptile brain does. It defends. So he's going to just come up with more reasons why he's right. And you're going to come up with more reasons why he's wrong and you're right. And next thing you know, the two of you leave the conversation further apart. And you thought your intention was to come together because you're telling him all this information and data that's going to change his mind. No, you're not. Your goal here was to change him. And people don't like to be changed. They like to be listened to. So you've just increased polarization. So so get this part and don't panic. I'm going to tell you how to deal with it. George is not the problem. They are not the problem. We are the problem. We have to own it. We have to own our role in this. Here's the great news. We control we. We can do something about this. So how? All right, you go, how in the world would I do this? Well, when George shifts into his reptilian brain, I'm going to give you tools and you'll learn tools that you can stay in your cortex so that you can stay in the conversation. And then what happens is George feels really safe because you're really listening and you get curious. And so then George feels safe to actually begin to explore what he really thinks. He doesn't have to defend himself anymore. He can go in and actually explore what he really thinks. This is the ideal. I'm not saying you can get there. This is very difficult to do, and especially if you have a lot of negative emotion about something, it may be impossible. And so again, I'm not saying this is what you need to do all the time, and this is the ideal, but at least you have to know what you're even going to. So here's a key point that I want to say, and I'm going to have Ashley put this in the chat too. So here's kind of the summary of all this. The solution is not getting others to see it our way. It's getting curious about their way so we can both relax and reflect in a safe space to question what we really believe and then find common ground to move forward. That was a lot. Ashley's putting it in a chat. But again, the solution is not getting others to see it our way. It's getting curious about their way so we can both relax and reflect in a safe space to question what we really believe and find common ground to move forward. Again, this is very difficult. It's not always going to be possible, but at least you know something that works. Have you ever heard that expression, the definition of insanity? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Well, we are all walking around in this state of stress and anxiety, doing the same thing over and over. What are we doing? Getting out there and trying to defend our position, trying to change other people's minds, and expecting different results. But let me be really clear. I'm not saying don't have these conversations. I'm not saying don't share data. I'm saying make sure you're doing it from your cortex and not your reptile brain. How do you know? How do you know? There's one really easy way to know. It's how you feel. If you feel good, if you see the other person as, if you're seeing this as an interesting, wonderful conversation and you're curious, you are operating out of your cortex. See, there's a lot for you to learn in this conversation. And at the end, you may still completely agree, you may still feel totally the same about your side, but you will have learned something new. You may have even reinforced your own side. Really key point, this isn't about accepting the other person's side. That's why we don't do it. That's why we fight. That's why the reptile brain's like, no way, we are not doing this. Because the reptile brain is terrified. If I actually listen to the other side, I might become like them. We won't. See, this is why this is what's killing us, literally. We have to feel good. And when we feel good, we think more clearly. We make better decisions. We expand our worldview. I can listen to that other side and not be threatened by it. And then, again, that other person's safe enough. They can begin to explore, but I can begin to explore too because I've got stuck places too. We need to own that. All right. So this is a journey of moving up the emotional scale. And, as I said, there's different stages of the reptile, right? So hatred is a really, really dangerous, intense, negative state. And frustration's a little bit better. So if you can go from hating somebody to just being frustrated with them, that's really good progress. And you're going to be more effective when you interact with them. The other myth we have is that we won't take action unless we got the reptile in charge. Last week I covered that. No, just the opposite. When the reptile's in charge, we do crazy things. We drive in people into cars. We hoard toilet paper. We, put too much bleach out there. Because we don't have the clearest thinking brain. All right. So how do we do this? So I'm going to give you a couple practices. Now, last week, as I mentioned earlier, we had the goodness glasses. And now what these do, you put these on for just a couple minutes and you stop that reptilian brain and you intentionally go out and look for all the good things. So if you're in a polarized, if you've got a situation where you're really angry at the other side of whatever it is, we've got an election coming up tomorrow, so this could happen. You try to find the good things about that person, about that group. What have you learned? It's really difficult, okay? But that's what the goodness glasses are about. Again, you're not going to agree with them. It's going to just get the cortex in the game so you can think clearly. This is about thinking clearly. You will, trust me, you will be better, make better decisions if you do this. So let's look at some daily practice. So that's the goodness glasses. I'm going to give you some more today. So now what I'm going to give you today is some questions. These are questions that you can use to help you move up the emotional scale depending on whatever you're dealing with. And as I mentioned, there's two stages in that reptilian brain. One is shutdown and the second is fight or flight. So you need to know, first of all, which one are you in? Shutdown is where you're done. I'm not turning on the TV. I'm not talking. I'm done. If you're in shutdown, at that point, you need to actually take care of yourself physically. And you'll see a lot of, posts and things on this. Make sure you get enough sleep, sunlight, exercise, nutrition, spend time with friends and family, meditation, maybe take a relaxing bath or relaxing music, candles, things that are going to get your nervous system back on track again. All right. So when you're in that stage, you need to just take care of yourself. Stage 2, fight or flight. So here's where you get into the polarization and things. Here's where now you got some energy to do something, but it's not positive energy. So I'm going to give you 5 questions here. And if you want to write these down, these are ones that you can ask yourself in the morning. Put on your goodness glasses for a couple minutes. Ask yourself any one or all of these questions on a particular topic. So the first one, can you find a glimmer of hope in here somewhere? Right? So we're just trying to move up the scale. We're trying to bring you some relief. Can you find a glimmer of hope somewhere? Can you find a glimmer of hope somewhere? All right. So again, just a little bit of relief, just a little pop, get that cortex a little bit further up. The second one, learning questions. Learning are always really good. What are you learning? What what are you learning, or what am I learning? We're always learning something. What are you learning about yourself, how you handle resilience, and in general? And I would add, what are the good things you're learning? I'm learning I really like Manhattans, right? So, what are you learning about yourself and in general? Third question, how are you managing to cope? So, you're surviving, you're coping. So, three, how are you managing to cope? Look at all the ways and the things you're doing that are working. And that's actually number four. What is working for you? So what's working? So all we're doing is building up kind of this positive emotion basket, because we got so much of the negative. Our brain's been so focused over there. We're just giving it some relief. What's working for you? And the last question, if you're dealing with polarization or whatever your issue is, what good can you find in the other side? What good can you find in the other side? This is where you have to just suck it up and say, okay, I get that the negative emotion isn't serving me, and I'm going to do it. So it's pretty much the goodness glasses, but focused on that other side. What is the good thing that you can find? Now, if you happen to be lucky enough that you're more towards the neutral stage now, and you want to get into stage 3, which is really about engaging, here's 2 questions that you can use for that. So first of all, who or what inspires you? Who or what inspires you? All right, so now we're moving into inspiration, because that's further up the scale, and that's kind of exciting. Who or what inspires you? And the second question, what are your dreams for the future of this? What are your dreams, right? Remember, Martin Luther King, everybody talks about him, but truly, I have a dream, right? He was operating at the high end of the scale. You have to be in the cortex to even think about your dreams for the future. And if you can't think about them, then that's also a big clue that you're not there. All righty. So we're coming towards the end of our time here, and I hope that helps. Those were some daily exercises you can do. And then again, I said there were 3 skills. One, again, was talking to yourself, understanding negative emotions not serving you. 2 is retraining your brain. I gave you this exercise today with the questions and the goodness glasses. You do that every day, you will begin to shift your brain naturally to get that cortex back on top. And we need to do this because evolution is so slow. You can't wait a million years for your brain to start doing this, right? So this is how you change it and accelerate it now. And then the third thing is some tools for crisis management, for when things really are acute and you're just really down in the depths of despair and you need help getting out. That's what I'm going to talk about on Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, is a specific tool called the Flourishing Formula, and how you can use that to get out of those really dark places or deal with any kind of situation. So all right, everybody. So that's what I have for you. And I wanted to, again, just also to tell you again. So we have a joy package for you that has more exercises, a whole lot more information. And actually, it actually has the flourishing formula I'm going to talk about next Thursday, and other things that aren't in these sessions that I'm doing. So it's free. It's on my website at appreciativeliving.com. And just remember, so my final words, this is actually my new tagline. Feel good to think good. Feel good to think good. Especially if you're in those polarizing conversations. If you find you're not feeling good or you're getting angry, stop. Stop the conversation, because you're not going to get anywhere with it, and neither are they, and you're only going to make things worse. It's okay. And, just say, you know what, I just can't talk about this now, or whatever it is your way of leaving the conversation. Let's talk about you and your life and the weather, or whatever it is. But if you can't get in that cortex, it's not benefiting anybody. So that's my message for today. Feel good to think good, and would love to see all of you on Thursday. And I got my free session with Daniel coming up. So thank you, everybody. Thank you. Have a great day, and look forward to connecting with you again on Thursday. Bye for now.